ESBR Boxing, delighted to be joined by Elliot Grigg, and we are in preview mode once again. Some Sunday night action in London at the O2 Arena on 31st of March. Main event, heavyweight clash. Fabio Wardley, Frazer Clarke, undefeated against undefeated. British title on the line. I think the Commonwealth title on the line as well. Cracking fight, one we've been waiting to see for a while now, and we're finally getting it. But instead of going into the fight and looking at it, and discussing how we think it will go, we'll give our predictions at the end. But as we always like to do now, mate, we like to ask the pressing questions straight off the bat. So my question for you, frankly, is, and kind of give me it in, go through both fighters, I suppose, individually. How far do you think both of these men can go? How far could Fabio Wardley go? How far could Frazer Clarke go? Could any of them become world champion, European? Where do you see their ceiling?
Oh, it's a brutal question, Paul. Thank you very much for the introduction, as always, and very eloquent and very, very warm in nature. I think it's an exciting fight, is what we'll say. It's an exciting fight because I think both guys are actually relatively well matched here. It's quite similar, but that both said, I'm not convinced that either of them are that great as heavyweights, to be perfectly honest with you. And that sounds very harsh thing to say, because I'm sure they'd slap me up around outside of a little. But what I'm saying is, I just don't think. I don't think world champion status, definitely not world champion status. I think that is almost a guarantee. I'm prepared to eat that hat that you mentioned on the last video again if either one of these two guys became world champion. European, definite possibility. I think could they fight up at world level? I mean, you know what heavyweight boxing's like. People tend to get opportunities potentially they don't necessarily deserve at different levels. I mean, even when you look at obviously Thompson versus Opetano, that wasn't a heavyweight. Stuff like that obviously can happen. So you can fight for a world title possibly, but I just don't see either of them being rounded enough. I think Clarke, from what I've seen, doesn't necessarily have the attributes as in like speed and gas tank and all that sort of stuff to essentially mix it with those guys. I know obviously he's only still quite young, but I just don't see him being anywhere near ready. And I think Fabio Ward, look at his record, and it doesn't suggest to me either with the guys that he's been matched against that there's that much faith that he can also make the step up anytime soon. He's had quite a lot of fights as well already. When I look at him, some on comparison to maybe like Daniel Dubois, say, will either of these guys beat Daniel Dubois? No. I don't think that's, and I look at Daniel Dubois going, will Daniel Dubois even win a world title? Possibly not, but he will at least fight for one. And I think he's better than these guys. So I have to put them down really as, don't even think them, I'm not sure they'll even make top 15, to be honest with you, in the heavyweight division, but I could be wrong, but I just don't think they're definitely not championship world title level, maybe not world level, but I think European level is probably fair. And especially at this stage, that's probably where we're looking. It's a British title fight for a reason, and I think that's the level, frankly, where they're at. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have I been too harsh? Talk to me.
Yeah, mate, I think a few things you said there I completely agree with. I mean, I think they're first and foremost, I think both are still very raw. Fabio Worley, obviously, everyone knows, came through the white collar scene. So it's as expected. He hasn't had that amateur pedigree that Frazer Clarke has. Frazer Clarke, stellar amateur, great extensive amateur record, was in there for years, obviously Olympian and all that. But as we've said loads of times before, amateur boxing and professional boxing is two completely different things. I think it's taken him a little longer than I maybe thought it would to adjust to the pro game. Yes, he's only had 8 fights and 6 stoppages, but you know, without sounding too harsh, have they been, must-watch fights? Not really. Like the Marius Wack one, that version of Marius Wack, you're thinking he should probably get him out of there. The Dave Allen one was a bit of a dull fight. Um, yeah, well, it just wasn't great. And then obviously Dave Allen getting pulled out by his corner as well. So we didn't see a kind of conclusive finish from Frazer Clarke. Wardley, on the other hand, I will give him his credit. He has got better and better as his career has progressed. Bona fide, legitimate British champion now. Fair play to him. Looked good last time out, beating David Adelaide by knockout. And the funny thing is, he's obviously 17-0. Wardley, the first fight, it was points when he was really raw, and then he's had 16 successive knockouts since then as he's up the levels. Obviously, knocked out former, mad to think of this, former multiple world title challenger Eric Molina, who fought Wilder for his belt and Joshua for his belt as well. But yeah, I think I think that it's hard to say, I suppose, because you can't say I'm not going to sit here and say Fabio Worley can go further and then Frazer Clarke wins the fight. Do you know what I mean? That would look a bit silly. So I'm not 100% sure. I don't think either can become world champion. I do agree with you there. European, yes, because depending on the opponent, you can get some quite weak European fights, in my opinion. Sometimes the British title is actually more difficult to win, believe it or not. But yeah, I think that neither will become world champion to answer the question, and could see them winning the European strap, but again, opponent dependent. Just before we come to our predictions, mate, I kind of want to ask you, and I probably do know the answer to this, to be honest with you, because you and I have discussed both of these fighters really at length before. But who has impressed you more in their career to date?
Yeah, you know what? I think maybe I was being a bit harsh actually. I'll come back. I'll re-dial it actually for Fabio Wardley a little bit because you look at he's only beaten who's in front of him at the end of the day and he stopped a lot of guys. So Fabio Wardley has in some ways been impressive in that respect. Like you say, not necessarily the experience either. And also what does impress me about him is the power. Like you mentioned, obviously, the stoppage victory over Molina, but you mentioned obviously some other names on that record. Nick Webb, friend of the show, but also, Nate Gorman, David Adlai, these guys that are kind of also around that. People have sort of suggested as being prospects as well. Obviously, Gorman, his career hasn't ended up in the way it was, but that's a kind of legit victory, to be perfectly honest with you. So, in some ways, going in there and blasting these guys out, take my hat off to him, fair enough. I'll have him definitely been more impressed by Fabio Ward. I can't really sit here and say I've been impressed by Frazer Clarke. I really cannot, and that is the reason is I mean, which was it? Was it which fight was it on Sky? Was it Dinu where he was apologising afterwards for the performance? I mean, it seems like every time I see him on the ring apron, he's apologising either for the performance or for something. And then the Marius Watch is a tough guy. Don't get me wrong, but Marius Watch is a guy that's like, you're looking at it going, yeah, give him rounds, whatever. But equally, like you probably should be getting him out of there. And Dave Allen, that's wasn't. I mean, that's not necessarily Frazer Clarke's fault. It's just terrible matchmaking. Dave Allen, wasn't really in the shape for it, I don't think either. So it's more of a money grab. So his career has been kind of, I think, handled poorly management wise to stage. But equally, I can't sit here and say I've been impressed by him. I've been impressed by his conduct actually outside of the ring. He's actually very impressive. I think when you get him on comms and when he talks about other boxers and his general kind of attitude and approach, I actually think is really kind of endearing. So I've been impressed by that. But when you're talking about in-ring actual CV, I haven't really been impressed to date. But if he does beat Fabio Wardley, I will be impressed. But yeah, at the moment, I'm far more impressed actually by the career of Fabio Wardley.
Yeah, I think that most people would say that. It's maybe an unfair question as well because Wardley's had nine more pro fights than Frazer Clarke, so more chance to potentially impress. I think I was impressed by Wardley last time out against Adelaide. I think he'd shown that he has learned a lot. Like, yes, he's still raw, supposedly, but even if you compare it to when he stopped Molina, for example, yeah, he stopped Molina emphatically, but there were still so many holes in his game. As soon as he threw a shot, his defense was coming right down. He's just getting better and better. He's getting more technically sound, fight on fight, and you will need to be more technically sound when you're fighting, a former Olympian, an elite amateur in Frazer Clarke who does all of the fundamentals really, really well. So yeah, I think fair to say Wardley has probably impressed me more. But in saying that, can't really disrespect Frazer Clarke too much. Again, both men have beaten who's been put in front of them, whether or not we think the opponents have been up to much or not. Prediction time though, Elliot. Who are you backing? Frazer Clarke or Fabio Wardley? Who comes out on top?
You know what, Paul? I see nothing other than Fabio Wardley winning this fight, and I actually reckon he's going to stop Frazer Clarke. Frankly, it's a 12-round fight, and I reckon he stops him before the ninth.
Emphatic, straight to the point, and I'm disagreeing with you. I don't know whether that comes as a surprise or not, but I could get some humble pie, be eating some humble pie here, but I still think for Fabio Wardley fundamentally isn't as good as Frazer Clarke. My only fear is that he could land on Frazer Clarke, and we haven't really seen that chin properly tested. But I'm going to go with Frazer Clarke to win this on points. So yeah, I could see him navigating the 12 rounds out here, the 36 minutes, and getting his hand raised in a close fight. But yeah, in my opinion, I see the former Olympian getting his hand raised. Guys, let us know your thoughts on this fight. Who's winning this one? Undefeated against undefeated. Someone's always got to go. Who's it going to be? Who's going to win? And how far could they go? Could either of these men become world champion? That remains to be seen. Be sure to check out the rest of the content on the channel, as we always say. More previews for all of the fights this weekend, as well as reviews, weigh-in reactions, fight reactions, betting shows, everything that you can think of. We've got you covered. Elliot, thanks very much for joining me as always, mate, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Paul. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching.